On February 18th, something shifted in the unseen realm concerning your children, and this was not random, accidental, or symbolic. This was an appointed moment, a marked day, a line drawn in the spirit. While you were going about your normal routine, perhaps unaware of the intensity of the battle that had been forming behind the scenes, heaven was issuing a command. On February 18th, Archangel Michael activated protective boundaries around your children. This was not a gentle suggestion. It was an enforcement. And the reason this message says, evidence of a sudden reversal is attached. Open now, is because what has already begun to change will soon become undeniable. There has been pressure around your children that you could feel but not fully explain. Subtle shifts, unusual moods, unexpected resistance, maybe even opportunities that did not sit right in your spirit. You sensed something was trying to pull at their focus, their innocence, their destiny. You prayed. You worry. You asked God to cover them when you could not physically be there. What you did not see was that those prayers were being recorded as legal petitions in the courts of heaven. February 18th became the response date. Why this date? Because divine timing does not move according to human panic. It moves according to purpose. There are moments when heaven allows certain tensions to build, not to harm, but to position a greater display of protection. February 18th was one of those moments. The atmosphere around your children reached a threshold, and heaven intervened with authority. Archangel Michael, the chief defender in spiritual warfare, did not come to observe. He came to establish boundaries. Protective boundaries are not invisible suggestions. They are spiritual borders that hostile forces cannot legally cross. They are lines drawn with authority that say, no further. And when those lines are activated, trajectories change instantly. Plans that were forming begin to collapse. Influences that were approaching are redirected. Doors that looked appealing suddenly close. Conversations shift. Desires realign. The reversal begins quietly, but powerfully. This is why the instruction says, open now. Because delay in understanding can cause you to miss the evidence already appearing. A sudden reversal does not always look dramatic at first. Sometimes it looks like a canceled plan, a changed attitude, an unexpected distraction that keeps your child from being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Sometimes it looks like peace returning to your home without explanation. What you may interpret as coincidence is often confirmation. There was an unseen escalation before February 18th. The next generation carries promise, creativity, calling, and spiritual authority. Whenever destiny is present, opposition attempts to position itself. But what the opposition did not account for was a parent who prays, a parent who discerns, a parent who refuses to surrender their child's future. Those prayers triggered a response. And when heaven responds, it does so with precision. Archangel Michael's activation signals enforcement. Enforcement means this is not temporary comfort. It is structural protection. Think of it as a fortified perimeter placed around your child's mind, emotions, environment, and future path. This boundary does not suffocate them. It shields them. It allows growth without interference. It blocks premature exposure. It silences invitations that are not aligned with their divine assignment. And here is the shocking revelation. The battle you feared might be escalating has already been reversed. What looked like vulnerability hath been replaced with covering. What felt unstable has been stabilized. What seemed like a slow drift has been corrected. The reversal did not wait for visible disaster. It intercepted it. You may soon notice subtle but undeniable shifts. a sudden maturity, a loss of interest in something that once consumed them, a new protective instinct in your own spirit. These are not random behavioral changes. They are evidence attached, evidence that a line hath been drawn and honored. This message is important because awareness activates agreement. When you recognize what has been done in the spirit, you align with it instead of fighting shadows. Instead of reacting in fear, you stand in confidence. Instead of questioning every movement, you begin to observe the protection unfolding. February 18th is now marked in the spiritual timeline of your household. It represents intervention. It represents enforcement. It represents a divine answer that did not arrive with noise, but with authority. The urgency of this message is not to alarm you. It is to awaken you. Something has already shifted. Protection is active. The reversal has begun. And what you are about to understand next will reveal just how intense the invisible battle truly was, and why this activation was not just necessary, but critical. Before February 18th, there was movement in the unseen realm that many parents could sense but not fully describe. It felt like a quiet tension, like something pressing against the atmosphere of your home. The invisible battle over your children was not loud, but it was strategic. The next generation has always been a target because they carry what the future requires. Within your child lies potential that reaches beyond what you currently see. Ideas not yet spoken, gifts not yet developed, assignments not yet revealed. And whenever destiny is present, resistance tries to form around it. This battle did not begin on February 18th. It had been building. Small shifts, subtle distractions, new influences entering their environment, digital noise increasing, peer pressures intensifying, emotional fluctuations that seem out of character. You may have noticed your child wrestling with thoughts or moods that felt unfamiliar. Perhaps there were sudden arguments, unusual fatigue, or moments when their confidence appeared shaken. These were not random patterns. They were pressure points. The unseen battle works gradually. It attempts to normalize what should feel uncomfortable. It whispers confusion. It introduces alternatives that look harmless but carry long-term consequences. It tries to create distance from purpose, from identity, from divine protection. And because children are still forming their understanding of the world, they can be more sensitive to unseen influence. That is why spiritual covering is not optional. It is essential. But here is what the opposition often underestimates. A praying parent disrupts silent attacks. When you felt that nudge to intercede, when you spoke a simple prayer over your child before they left the house, when you declared protection even through tears, you were not speaking into empty air. You were issuing a defense request. You were activating heavenly attention. The invisible battle escalates when destiny gets closer. Sometimes the pressure increases right before a breakthrough, and many parents sense that something was intensifying. Perhaps opportunities appeared that did not align with your child's character. Perhaps certain friendships felt questionable. Perhaps there was a sudden temptation that seemed unusually strong. The timing was not coincidence. The enemy attempts to position detours before divine acceleration. But what you could not see was that heaven was not passive. The spiritual realm is not one-sided. While strategies were forming against your child's peace and future, a counter-command was being prepared. February 18th became the intervention point. It marked the moment when the invisible battle met visible enforcement. Archangel Michael's role in spiritual warfare is not symbolic. It is authoritative. When protective boundaries are activated, it means the battle shifts from infiltration to restriction. It means forces that once had access lose it. It means whispers lose volume. It means confusion meets clarity. And sometimes, when protection intensifies, the atmosphere changes so subtly that you almost miss it. The arguments reduce. The anxiety decreases. The sudden urge to rebel softens. That is not luck. That is enforcement. This is why understanding the invisible battle matters. If you don't recognize that there was a strategy against your children, you may underestimate the magnitude of what has just been done for them. Protection is most powerful when it intercepts before damage occurs. And that is exactly what this activation accomplished. You may have wondered why certain situations suddenly dissolved. Why a plan fell apart that once seemed certain. Why an influence faded without confrontation. Those were not disappointments. Those were reversals. The enemy's timing was interrupted. The script that was forming around your child's life was rewritten before it reached the next chapter. And now, let me speak directly to you as a parent or guardian. Your awareness is part of this protection. When you align your words with what heaven has already established, you reinforce the boundary. Speak life. Declare peace. Refuse fear. The invisible battle loses strength when exposed to light. And this is where unity becomes powerful. If this message resonates with what you have sensed in your own home, take a moment to stand in agreement. Like this video as a declaration that you receive this covering. Subscribe to this channel to remain spiritually equipped for what unfolds next. Share this message with another parent who needs reassurance that heaven is actively defending their children. And comment your agreement, not for attention, but as a public stand that your household is under divine protection. Because when parents unite in faith, it creates a ripple in the spirit. It strengthens the atmosphere around families. It reminds the unseen realm that these children are not unguarded. They are watched. They are covered. They are defended. The invisible battle was real. But so is the intervention. And what happened on February 18th was not a reaction to defeat. It was a declaration of authority. The tide has shifted. The pressure has met resistance. And the boundaries now standing around your children are not fragile. In the next part, we will step into the exact moment Archangel Michael intervened, and what that activation truly means for your household moving forward. There are moments in the spirit that do not announce themselves with thunder, yet they carry more authority than any visible storm. February 18th was one of those moments. While the world continued in its normal rhythm, a command was issued in the unseen realm concerning your children. This was not symbolic language. This was not poetic imagination. This was an activation. Archangel Michael stepped forward in his divine assignment as defender, and protective boundaries were established with precision. To understand the weight of this moment, you must understand who stands behind the name. Archangel Michael is not merely a figure of inspiration. He represents heavenly enforcement. When divine order is threatened, when destinies are contested, when spiritual territory must be defended, his role is to act under God's authority. On February 18th, the tension that had been building around your children reached a point where intervention was not delayed any longer. Heaven responded. The activation of protective boundaries means that a line was drawn in the spirit realm around your children's minds, their environments, their relationships, and their future paths. It means access was restricted. It means interference was denied. Some influences that were approaching were stopped before they arrived. Some invitations that were forming dissolved before they were presented. Some harmful conversations were disrupted before they could take root. You may never fully see what was prevented, but that does not reduce the reality of what occurred. When heaven establishes a boundary, It is not fragile. It is legal. It is backed by authority. And what makes this activation powerful is that it was triggered in response to intercession. Your prayers are not small. Even the quiet whispers you spoke over your child while they slept carried weight. Every declaration of protection, every moment you anointed their future with faith instead of fear, built a case in the spirit. February 18th became the response date to accumulated faith. This stepping in was not dramatic for spectacle. It was strategic. The battle shifted from infiltration to enforcement. Instead of reacting to attacks, heaven prevented them. Instead of allowing gradual drift, divine alignment was restored. And some of you have already sensed it. A subtle calm, a quiet correction, a shift in atmosphere in your home. That is not imagination. That is evidence of activation. Protective boundaries also mean clarity. Confusion that once hovered begins to thin out. Emotional instability that seemed unexplainable begins to settle. The pressure that felt constant starts to lift. Your child may not even realize why certain desires have changed or why certain doors suddenly closed. But the spirit realm recognizes the shift. Access has been denied. And here is something profound. When Archangel Michael steps in, it signals that what is being protected carries weight. Your children are not ordinary in purpose. They are not accidental in design. There is assignment attached to their lives. The opposition sensed potential and attempted to position obstacles early. But heaven moved first. As you hear this, something within you may be confirming it. A deep inner knowing. An assurance that despite the concerns you carried, something has turned. Hold on to that confirmation. Because what comes next will reveal just how far-reaching this activation truly is. You will be glad you stayed attentive to this message, because understanding the next layer will strengthen your confidence in what has been secured. Now, before we move forward, we seal this moment with agreement. Type "My children are covered" in the comments if this resonates with you. Blessing code 184 is now activated. What you declare matters. When you speak alignment, you reinforce the boundary that has already been drawn. And as this revelation settles into your spirit, I want to speak to those who feel stirred to go deeper. This message is not just information, it is part of a mission. Every time you support this channel through Super Thanks, membership, or PayPal, you are not funding content. You are sowing into soil that carries light to homes that feel surrounded by darkness. Scripture declares, as long as the earth remains, seed time and harvest shall not cease. And that is not distant history. That is God speaking life over every seed you release. When you give, you are placing oil in the lamp so this message of protection can reach another parent who is praying in silence. I am inviting you personally, step into this moment as an active participant in what heaven is doing. Do not let this be a message you receive without responding. The PayPal link is in the description, and the QR code may be flashing on your screen. So as an act of obedience, and may every seed return as protection, provision, and peace over your household. Activate your support now. This stepping in on February 18th was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of a reversal that is already unfolding in ways you may not yet fully recognize. To fully grasp what was activated on February 18th, you must understand what protective boundaries truly mean in the spiritual realm. These are not emotional comforts or symbolic gestures meant to make you feel secure. Protective boundaries are structured spiritual realities. They are divine limits established by authority. When heaven draws a line, it is not decoration, it is enforcement. Throughout Scripture, there is a recurring pattern. When God chooses to protect, He surrounds. He places hedges, walls, pillars of fire, angelic encampments. Protection in the spiritual realm is not passive, it is intentional positioning. It creates space for growth without interference. It allows destiny to mature without premature disruption. When Archangel Michael activated protective boundaries around your children, it signified that heaven placed a structured perimeter around their present and their future. Think about what a boundary accomplishes. A boundary defines what is permitted and what is prohibited. It establishes order. It prevents intrusion. In the natural world, boundaries protect nations, homes, and properties. In the spiritual world, boundaries protect identity, peace, calling, and timing. When such a boundary is activated, hostile forces may still observe, but they cannot access. They may attempt to whisper, but they cannot penetrate. The line has been marked. This is crucial for you to understand, because many parents assume protection means the absence of challenges. That is not always the case. Protection does not eliminate growth. It eliminates destruction. Your child may still face tests, but the tests will not be allowed to derail their assignment. They may encounter choices, but the boundaries ensure that certain doors simply will not open. There are influences that would have reached them months ago, but now cannot cross. A spiritual boundary is also preventative. Often, we only notice protection after something bad happens and we survive it. But divine boundaries are designed to stop events before they manifest. You may never know about the accident that almost aligned with your child's schedule but was delayed. You may never see the harmful influence that was redirected elsewhere. You may not realize that a conversation meant to plant doubt was interrupted. Protection does not always announce itself. It quietly blocks what was never meant to touch your child's destiny. And here is something deeper. Boundaries bring clarity. When there is no boundary, confusion spreads. But when heaven establishes a perimeter, alignment follows. Distractions begin to lose appeal. Associations feel uncomfortable. Misaligned opportunities lose their shine. Your child may not understand why certain things suddenly feel off, but the boundary is guiding their discernment. It is creating internal resistance to external harm. Permanent covering is different from temporary help. Temporary help responds to crisis. Permanent covering prevents crisis from escalating. The activation on February 18th was not a temporary reaction. It was structural reinforcement. It fortified weak entry points. It strengthened areas where pressure had been building. It closed openings that had been subtly forming over time. You may even notice that you feel calmer without knowing why. That is because boundaries do not only protect your child, they stabilize your household. The spiritual atmosphere shifts when enforcement is present. Fear decreases. Edge softens. The urgency that once kept you restless begins to settle. Peace becomes more natural. However, boundaries require agreement. While heaven has established them, your words and awareness reinforce them. When you speak fear repeatedly, you question what has already been secured. But when you speak confidence, you align with the protection. Declare that your children are guarded. Declare that their steps are ordered. Declare that their environment is filtered by divine authority. Your voice matters. Another powerful aspect of protective boundaries is timing preservation. Many destinies are damaged not because the calling was wrong, but because exposure came too early. Premature exposure can distort identity. But boundaries preserve timing. They ensure your child encounters opportunities in the correct season. They delay what is not yet safe. They accelerate what is divinely prepared. They guard innocence until maturity is ready to handle responsibility. You might have seen certain doors close abruptly and wondered why. That closure may have been the boundary in action. You might have watched your child lose interest in something that once seemed consuming. That could have been the perimeter redirecting their focus. You may have felt a sudden prompting to change routines, friendships, or environments. Boundaries often work through intuition and discernment. This activation also means that what once seemed accessible to negativity is now restricted. It means patterns that tried to repeat will struggle to reestablish themselves. It means cycles that were forming have been interrupted. There is authority backing this perimeter. It is not fragile. It is not temporary. It stands. Understanding this changes how you respond. Instead of reacting with anxiety at every challenge, you respond with trust. Instead of assuming vulnerability, you assume covering. Instead of fearing the unknown, you recognize the boundary already in place. The protective boundaries activated on February 18th are not visible to the natural eye, but they are active in the spiritual realm. They are guarding minds, filtering influences, redirecting paths, and stabilizing futures. What was once vulnerable is now fortified. What was once exposed is now shielded. And as we move forward, you will begin to see how these boundaries are not only defensive, they are setting the stage for a sudden reversal that is already unfolding. Now that you understand what protective boundaries are and how they function, we must step into the heart of this message, the sudden reversal. Because February 18th was not only about defense. It was about redirection. It was about turning what was forming in one direction and sending it in another. And when heaven reverses something, it does not do so partially. It shifts momentum. A spiritual reversal is not simply a pause in negative activity. It is a rerouting of outcome. Imagine a trajectory that was slowly moving toward confusion, compromise, or harm. That path may have seemed subtle at first, barely noticeable. A new influence, a new thought pattern, a gradual shift in focus. Left unchecked, small shifts become defining moments. But a reversal intercepts that trajectory before it solidifies, and takes what was bending one way and straightens it toward purpose. What makes this reversal powerful is its suddenness. You may not have seen dramatic warning signs. You may not have witnessed an open crisis. But behind the scenes, a pattern was attempting to establish itself. And just as it began to gain ground, February 18th marked the intervention point. The activation of protective boundaries did more than block access. It reversed direction. In spiritual terms, a reversal cancels assignments that were forming. It dismantles plans before they mature. It interrupts conversations in the unseen realm. The momentum that once favored distraction now favors clarity. The emotional turbulence that seemed unpredictable begins to stabilize. And sometimes, the shift feels so natural that you almost question whether anything was wrong in the first place. Have you noticed something recently that felt like a quiet improvement? Perhaps your child seems more grounded. Maybe an unhealthy attachment dissolved without confrontation. Maybe an opportunity that once seemed appealing suddenly lost its appeal. Those are not coincidences. Those are indicators of redirection. A sudden reversal can also manifest as protection from unseen danger. A canceled event. A delayed schedule. A change in plan that initially seemed inconvenient. Only later do you realize that delay was divine. That inconvenience was intervention. What felt frustrating was actually shielding. Sometimes the reversal begins in the heart before it appears in circumstances. Your child may begin to feel uncomfortable with influences they once tolerated. They may develop new discernment. They may question environments that once seemed exciting. That internal shift is part of the reversal. The boundary is not only external, it is influencing their perception. And here is something deeply important. Reversals often arrive quietly because heaven prefers stability over spectacle. This was not about creating panic. It was about preserving destiny. If destruction never manifests, there is no dramatic rescue story. But prevention is still protection, and protection is still power. You may also notice doors opening that did not exist before. When something negative is reversed, space is created. And in that space, divine opportunity enters. New friendships aligned with purpose. The new interests that cultivate growth. New conversations that affirm identity. A reversal does not leave emptiness. It replaces what was misaligned with what is ordained. It is also possible that you feel a personal shift as a parent. Perhaps your anxiety has lessened. Perhaps your prayers now feel calmer. That is because when a reversal takes place, it affects the entire atmosphere of the household. The tension that once hovered begins to dissolve. The weight that felt constant begins to lift. Understand this clearly. The reversal is not fragile. It is sustained by the boundaries that were activated. This is not a temporary swing of emotion. It is structural redirection. What was heading toward instability is now anchored. What was drifting is now aligned. And sometimes, evidence of reversal reveals itself in hindsight. Weeks from now, you may look back and realize that a situation could have unfolded very differently. You may recognize that timing shifted just enough to protect. You may see how certain influences faded without confrontation. That awareness will confirm what was done on February 18th. Reversals also expose the limits of opposition. The enemy can attempt, but cannot override divine authority. When heaven steps in, momentum changes. Assignments collapse. Confusion loses coherence. The tide turns. If you have been carrying concern about your child's direction, release it. The path that once seemed uncertain has been recalibrated. If you feared that something negative was gaining strength, understand that it has been weakened. The reversal has already begun its work. But here is the powerful truth. This is only the beginning of what that shift will produce. Because once a reversal happens, restoration often follows. And restoration brings growth, stability, and new levels of protection. In the next part, we will explore the signs that confirm this reversal is already unfolding in real time, signs you may already be witnessing without fully recognizing them. When a spiritual reversal takes place, it does not always announce itself with dramatic evidence. More often, it reveals itself through subtle but undeniable shifts. If February 18th marked the activation of protective boundaries and the beginning of redirection, then there are signs, real, observable indicators, that confirm the reversal is already unfolding in your child's life. One of the first signs is unexpected peace. You may notice that tension which once felt constant has eased. Situations that previously escalated quickly now resolve more gently. Your child's emotional responses may seem more balanced. Where there was irritation, there is now calm. Where there was confusion, there is growing clarity. Peace is often the first footprint of divine intervention. It settles into the atmosphere quietly but firmly. Another sign is a sudden shift in interest. Something that once consumed your child's attention may begin to lose its grip. Activities, friendships, or influences that once felt dominant may gradually fade into the background. This does not always happen through confrontation. Sometimes it happens through disinterest. The excitement that once fueled attachment simply disappears. That is not coincidence. It is redirection. You may also notice doors closing without your effort. Plans fall apart. Invitations get canceled. Circumstances shift at the last minute. Initially, these changes might feel disappointing or inconvenient, but as time unfolds, you begin to sense relief. You may even realize that those closed doors prevented exposure to something misaligned. A reversal often protects by removing access. In some cases, the sign appears as new opportunities emerging. When something negative is reversed, space opens for something aligned to take its place. A new friendship that carries healthier influence. A new interest that cultivates talent. A new mentor or teacher who affirms identity instead of distorting it. The reversal does not create emptiness, it creates room for growth. Another powerful sign is heightened discernment. Your child may begin to recognize right from wrong with greater sensitivity. They may question influences they once accepted. They may seek your advice more often. They may show unexpected maturity in situations that previously overwhelmed them. That internal strengthening is evidence that the boundary is shaping their perception from within. Protection can also reveal itself through near misses. Perhaps there was a schedule change that kept them from being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Perhaps a disagreement redirected them from a harmful environment. Perhaps a technological issue disrupted access to something unhealthy. At first glance, these moments appear random. But when viewed through the lens of activation, they look like intervention. You may even observe a shift in your own spirit. The anxiety that once felt heavy begins to lessen. The constant urge to monitor every detail softens. Instead of reacting out of fear, you feel guided by calm awareness. That inner stabilization is part of the reversal. When boundaries are active, they protect not only your child, but also your peace. Another sign is restoration of communication. Conversations that once felt strained begin to flow more naturally. Your child may open up unexpectedly. They may express thoughts and concerns more clearly. Barriers that once seemed immovable begin to lower. It is also important to notice subtle physical and environmental changes. Perhaps sleep patterns improve. Perhaps academic focus strengthens. Perhaps the overall energy in your home feels lighter. These shifts are not always dramatic, but they are consistent. When divine boundaries stand, the atmosphere adjusts accordingly. Do not underestimate small improvements. A sudden smile, a renewed sense of motivation, a moment of gratitude expressed without prompting. These are signs of alignment. Reversal does not always look like rescue from disaster. Sometimes it looks like prevention of decline. And here is something profound: you may never know the full extent of what was prevented. Protection often works behind the scenes. There are conversations that never happened, paths that never crossed, decisions that were never made. The absence of disaster is itself evidence. Just because you did not see the danger does not mean it was not there. Pay attention over the coming days and weeks. Observe patterns rather than isolated moments. Reversals reveal themselves through consistency. Stability becomes more common. Clarity becomes more natural. Confidence becomes more visible. The boundary continues to enforce alignment quietly, but firmly. If you have been waiting for a dramatic sign, shift your perspective. The greatest miracles are often the ones that stabilize rather than shock. The fact that your child is protected, redirected, and realigned without crisis is itself extraordinary. The reversal that began on February 18th is not theoretical. It is tangible. It is manifesting in peace, redirection, protection, opportunity, and discernment. What once seemed uncertain is becoming steady. What once felt vulnerable is now guarded. And as we continue, You will understand why this specific date carried such spiritual weight, and why its timing was not random, but divinely appointed. There is a reason this did not happen on February 10th. There is a reason it was not delayed until March. February 18th was not a random date floating in the calendar of human routine. It was appointed. And when heaven appoints a moment, it aligns circumstances, prayers, and timing with precision that cannot be replicated by human urgency. Many parents pray daily for protection. You have likely prayed countless times over your children's safety, their decisions, their friendships, their future. So why would heaven mark a specific date for activation? Because there are thresholds in the spirit. There are moments when accumulated prayers reach fulfillment timing. There are seasons when tension builds to a point where intervention is not only requested, it is scheduled. February 18th represented a spiritual intersection. On one side was growing pressure. On the other side was maturing protection. What had been forming quietly behind the scenes reached a tipping point. The invisible battle you now understand was approaching a critical stage. But instead of allowing it to advance further, heaven established a cutoff. Divine timing operates differently from human fear. When we sense threat, we want immediate resolution. We want instant clarity. But heaven sees the full landscape. It knows not only what is happening, but what could happen if left unaddressed. And sometimes, protection is delayed slightly, not to endanger, but to expose patterns that must be permanently blocked. February 18th was chosen because the pattern attempting to form around your children had reached its final allowable stage. It had extended as far as it legally could. No further permission was granted. The activation of protective boundaries was not reactionary. It was strategic. It prevented escalation. It halted progression. It secured the perimeter before irreversible damage could even attempt to manifest. There are divine calendars that humans do not see. Moments align with other unseen movements. Conversations in the spirit realm conclude. Assignments are reviewed. Intercessions are weighed. And then a command is issued. February 18th was a command day. It is important to understand this because it removes doubt. If this had happened randomly, you might question its stability. But when something is divinely timed, it carries permanence. It is anchored in purpose. It is not fragile. It is not experimental. It is established. Consider how many small details may have aligned leading up to that date. Perhaps you felt prompted to pray more intensely. Perhaps a conversation sparked awareness. Perhaps an uneasy feeling nudged you into deeper intercession. Those were not coincidences. They were preparations. Heaven often stirs awareness before it acts, lining you emotionally and spiritually with what is about to unfold. February 18th also represents preservation of destiny timing. Your children carry assignments that must unfold in the right season. Premature exposure to certain pressures could distort that unfolding. The activation on that specific date ensured that timing remained intact. It secured their developmental process. It shielded their growth stage. There is also something significant about how heaven intervenes before visibility. If intervention had waited until crisis was obvious, restoration would have required repair. But because February 18th was chosen at the exact threshold, reversal required no damage control. It required only redirection. You may not have noticed anything dramatic on that day. It may have passed like any other date on the calendar. But in the unseen realm, movement was precise. A boundary was drawn. A perimeter was fortified. Access was denied. And once that line was established, it was not erased. The choice of February 18th also reveals something about divine attentiveness. It shows that heaven monitors the progression of events carefully. It does not sleep through tension. It does not overlook gradual shifts. It tracks them. It measures them. And when the appointed moment arrives, it responds decisively. This should strengthen your trust. Protection was not accidental. It was scheduled. The reversal was not delayed beyond safety. It was implemented at the exact moment needed. Even if you felt concern leading up to that date, understand now that concern was never stronger than authority. And here is a deeper layer. Once a date is marked by intervention, it becomes a reference point. In the future, when doubt attempts to surface, you will remember that February 18th was a turning point. You will recall that pressure met enforcement. You will recognize that unseen movement secured visible stability. Nothing about this was random. Nothing about this was reactive panic. It was intentional timing intersecting with intercession. It was divine strategy preventing escalation. It was authority stepping in before vulnerability became exposure. February 18th stands as a line in the timeline of your household. Before it, pressure was forming. After it, boundaries were active. That distinction matters. It confirms that what could have progressed further was halted. And as we move forward, you will understand something even more powerful. What the enemy cannot cross now that this activation has been established. When February 18th marked the activation of protective boundaries around your children, it did more than interrupt a forming pattern. It established a restriction. There are lines now in place that cannot be crossed. And this is not symbolic comfort. This is spiritual enforcement backed by authority. In the unseen realm, access determines influence. If something has access, it can whisper. If it can whisper, it can plant suggestion. If it can plant suggestion, it can solely shape direction. But when access is denied, influence weakens. And when influence weakens, strategy collapses. The activation that took place has shifted your children from vulnerable exposure to guarded territory. There are environments that once seemed within reach that now feel distant. There are influences that attempted to attach that have lost connection. There are conversations that would have pulled your child into confusion that now dissolve before they begin. This is what enforcement looks like. It does not always remove visibility, but it removes permission. The enemy cannot cross the boundary of identity now established. Confusion about who your child is will not root as deeply as it once threatened to. Labels that tried to distort their sense of self will struggle to stick. The boundary filters those narratives before they embed into belief. Identity is being guarded. The enemy cannot cross the boundary of timing. Opportunities that would have introduced premature exposure will not align as easily. Even if invitations appear, they will not carry the same pull. There will be resistance. There will be delays. There will be disruptions that protect developmental seasons. Timing is being preserved. The enemy cannot cross the boundary of destiny assignment. The gifts and calling placed within your child are not unguarded. Attempts to redirect them into paths that drain rather than develop will encounter resistance. Distractions will lose endurance. Misaligned passions will fade. Alignment is being enforced. The enemy also cannot cross the boundary of household atmosphere as easily as before. Tension that once lingered without explanation will not dominate. Cycles of emotional instability will be interrupted. The heaviness that felt constant will encounter limitation. Peace has legal standing now. Understand this clearly. Restriction does not mean absence of testing. It means limitation of damage. Your child may still face choices, but the outcomes will not spiral unchecked. There is a ceiling now to what negativity can accomplish. There is a boundary to how far interference can extend. You may notice that certain temptations feel weaker, that certain influences lose their shine faster, that certain arguments dissolve quicker. These are signs of enforcement. When authority backs a boundary, pressure cannot push beyond it indefinitely. And here is something powerful. Sometimes enforcement causes sudden exposure. When access is revoked, hidden motives surface. Individuals who carried subtle negative influence may reveal themselves through unexpected behavior. Situations that seem neutral may suddenly show their true nature. Do not be alarmed if exposure happens. Exposure is evidence that restriction is working. This is also why confidence must replace fear. Fear questions boundaries. Confidence reinforces them. Speak with authority over your children. Declare that no unauthorized influence has permission. Declare that their minds are guarded. Declare that their steps are directed. Your agreement strengthens enforcement. Now, as this truth settles in, hold on, because what comes next deepens the impact of everything you have heard. You will be glad you remained attentive to this unfolding revelation. Before we continue, seal this understanding with agreement. Type divine boundaries stand in the comments. Blessing code 502 is now activated. When you declare it, you align your voice with what heaven has already established. And in this moment of alignment, I want to speak to those who feel stirred in their spirit. What you are witnessing through this message is not just information. It is like breaking into homes where parents have been praying in silence. When you give through super thanks, membership, or PayPal, you are not supporting a platform. You are sowing seed into a field where souls are being strengthened and families are being guarded. The word says, "Give, and it shall be given unto you." And that is not a distant echo. It is God speaking promise over your obedience. As you release your seed, you become part of the hedge, being built around another child somewhere in the world. I am inviting you personally. Step into this flow of protection and provision. The PayPal link is in the description, and the QR code may be flashing before you. Do not hesitate in this moment of stirring. Sow as an act of prophetic agreement, and may every seed you release return as multiplied peace, stability, and blessing over your household. Activate your support now. What the enemy cannot cross is not temporary. It stands because authority established it. It holds because heaven enforced it. And what is unfolding next will reveal your role in sustaining this protected season. Now that protective boundaries have been activated and enforcement has been established, your role becomes clearer than ever. February 18th marked a divine intervention, but protection does not remove responsibility. It strengthens it. Heaven has drawn the line, but you are called to stand in agreement with it. Your first role in this season is awareness. Not fear-driven awareness, but spiritually grounded attentiveness. You are not called to monitor every breath your child takes. You are called to remain spiritually aligned. Pay attention to subtle shifts. Notice patterns. Stay present. The boundary is active, but your discernment helps you cooperate with it. When something feels misaligned, do not ignore it. When peace settles over a decision, honor it. Awareness keeps you in step with what heaven has already secured. Your second role is declaration. Words carry weight. The atmosphere of your home responds to what you repeatedly speak. If you constantly speak anxiety, you feed tension. If you consistently declare protection, peace, and purpose, you reinforce the boundary. Speak life over your children when they are present and when they are not. Declare that their minds are clear. Declare that their choices are guided. Declare that no negative influence has permission to override divine order. Do not underestimate the power of spoken agreement. Your third role is environment management. Protective boundaries in the spirit are powerful, but you still have authority over the physical atmosphere. Guard what enters your home through media, conversations, and relationships. Be intentional about the spaces your children occupy. This is not about control. It is about stewardship. When you align the physical environment with spiritual protection, you strengthen stability. There is also a call to relational connection in this season. Protection does not mean distance. It means proximity with purpose. Talk with your children. Listen without immediate judgment. Create safe spaces for them to express questions and concerns. The boundary may block external interference, but internal communication builds resilience. When children feel heard, they are less vulnerable to outside validation. Another vital aspect of your role is modeling faith rather than fear. Children observe reactions more than lectures. If they see calm trust in you, it stabilizes them. If they sense constant panic, it unsettles them. The activation on February 18th was not meant to increase your anxiety. It was meant to relieve it. Walk in confidence. Show them what anchored belief looks like. It is also important to maintain gratitude. Gratitude keeps you aligned with what has already been done. When you thank God for protection before seeing dramatic evidence, you strengthen your trust. Gratitude shifts your focus from potential threats to confirmed covering. And let this be clear, you are not alone in this responsibility. The same authority that activated boundaries empowers you to stand firm. You do not carry this season by your own strength. You cooperate with it. This is also a moment to unite with other parents. Share wisdom. Pray together. Stand in collective agreement. When families align in faith, it amplifies spiritual stability across communities. If this message has strengthened your confidence as a parent, take a moment to stand publicly in agreement. Share this video with another parent who needs reassurance that protection is active. Like this message as a declaration that you receive this season with faith. Subscribe to this channel so you remain equipped for the spiritual shifts unfolding around your family. And comment your commitment, not for attention, but as a statement that your household stands aligned with divine order. Your participation matters. Unity creates reinforcement. Now, hold on to this truth. What you do in this season influences what unfolds next. The boundary is established, but the future phase of protection requires sustained alignment. And what is about to be revealed next will deepen your understanding of how evidence of this activation continues to surface in ways you may not yet expect. When the message declared, evidence of a sudden reversal is attached. Open now. It was not speaking about a physical document or a visible certificate. The evidence is unfolding in real time, woven into the details of your daily life. But to recognize it, you must shift how you look at what is happening around your children. Evidence of divine intervention rarely arrives with a label. It does not announce itself with flashing signs. It appears through patterns, shifts, and subtle confirmations that something has changed beneath the surface. The key is perception. When you begin to observe through spiritual awareness rather than fear, you start to see the fingerprints of protection everywhere. One form of evidence is internal emotional stability. Perhaps your child has become calmer in situations that once triggered frustration or confusion. Perhaps their reactions are more measured. Maybe they are thinking before speaking in ways that surprise you. Emotional regulation is not random growth when it aligns with a spiritual activation. It is confirmation that pressure has decreased. Another piece of evidence is restored focus. If distraction once dominated their attention, you may now see increased concentration. Tasks that were once avoided are approached with less resistance. Academic performance may show subtle improvement. Creative interests may deepen. Focus is a sign that interference has weakened. Look also at relational shifts. As a friendship that felt questionable begun to distance naturally. As a new, healthier connection formed without you forcing it. Relationships often reflect spiritual alignment. When boundaries are active, misaligned associations struggle to maintain proximity. Healthier influences gravitate closer. Sometimes evidence appears as prevention you only recognize later. A canceled trip that initially disappointed your child. A missed event due to scheduling changes. A disagreement that redirected plans. Later, you discover that something problematic occurred in the space they avoided. Those moments are not accidents. They are confirmations of restricted access. Pay attention to your own intuition. Have you felt prompted to adjust routines? To ask certain questions? To be present in specific moments? Those inner nudges are often part of the protective system at work. Evidence is not only external. It is internal guidance that grows sharper when boundaries are active. Dreams can also serve as confirmation. Some parents report heightened clarity in dreams after seasons of intense prayer. These dreams may not be dramatic, but they carry reassurance or direction. When the spiritual atmosphere stabilizes, clarity increases. Notice changes in your household atmosphere. Is there less unexplained tension? Is laughter more frequent? Does your home feel lighter? Atmosphere is a powerful indicator of spiritual movement. When enforcement has been established, heaviness often dissipates. Another sign of attached evidence is the exposure of hidden motives. If someone's influence over your child begins to show unhealthy patterns more clearly than before, that exposure is protection. It allows you to address concerns early rather than after damage. Boundaries do not always remove individuals immediately. Sometimes they reveal truth so you can act wisely. You may also see unexpected favor. Opportunities that align with your child's gifts may surface at the right moment. Recognition for their effort may increase. Confidence may rise naturally rather than forced. Favor is often the companion of reversal. It is important not to dismiss small changes. Evidence accumulates gradually. A conversation here, a decision there, a moment of maturity, a redirection that feels almost invisible. When you step back and view these details collectively, a pattern emerges. The trajectory is different. The atmosphere is steadier. The future feels less uncertain. Even resistance can be evidence. If your child attempts to move toward something misaligned and encounters obstacles repeatedly, that is not necessarily failure. It may be prevention. When access is restricted, attempts to cross the boundary often feel frustrating. But frustration in misalignment is mercy. The message said, "Open now," because awareness accelerates recognition. If you ignore evidence, you miss encouragement. But when you observe carefully, gratitude grows. And gratitude strengthens faith. Over the coming days and weeks, remain attentive. Journal what you notice if needed. Reflect on moments that feel unusually protected. Connect the dots. What once seemed random will begin to look intentional. The evidence attached is not theoretical. It is woven into conversations, timing shifts, emotional changes, relational realignments, and avoided dangers. The reversal is not abstract. It is observable. And as we move into the next phase, you will understand how to prepare your household not only to remain protected, but to thrive within the boundaries that have been established. The activation on February 18th was not an ending. It was a beginning. Protective boundaries have been established. A sudden reversal has already begun unfolding. Evidence is surfacing in subtle but undeniable ways. But protection is not a static event. It is a living atmosphere. And now, you are entering the next phase, preparation for sustained covering. When heaven fortifies a perimeter, it creates stability. But stability must be stewarded. This is not about striving. It is about alignment. The same authority that established boundaries now invites you to walk in harmony with them. Preparation does not mean bracing for danger. It means positioning for growth within safety. The first step in this preparation is strengthening faith intentionally. Faith is not passive belief. It is active agreement. In this season, guard your thoughts. If fear tries to resurface, remind yourself of February 18th. Recall the activation. Speak it aloud if necessary. The mind must be trained to trust what has already been secured. Doubt weakens confidence, but remembrance restores it. Second, maintain spiritual consistency. The prayers that contributed to this activation were not wasted whispers. They were seeds. Continue planting them. Cover your children in prayer not out of panic, but out of partnership. There is a difference between praying from fear and praying from authority. This season calls for authority. You are not begging for protection. You are reinforcing it. Third, cultivate gratitude as a daily posture. Gratitude locks in peace. When you thank God for what He has already done, you prevent anxiety from reclaiming space. Speak gratitude in front of your children. Let them hear you acknowledge protection. This not only strengthens your own faith but models trust for them. Preparation also includes teaching your children about boundaries in age-appropriate ways. They do not need to understand the complexity of spiritual enforcement, but they can learn discernment. Teach them to recognize what feels safe and what does not. Teach them that saying no is strength, not weakness. Teach them that their identity is valuable and protected. When children understand their worth, they are less likely to cross into harmful territory. Another vital aspect of preparation is maintaining healthy communication. Continue building relational bridges. Ask questions. Listen carefully. Affirm their growth. Boundaries are powerful, but relationships sustain stability. When children feel connected at home, they are less tempted to seek belonging in unsafe spaces. This next phase also invites you to expect continued divine intervention. Do not assume that February 18th was a single isolated act. It was a turning point that set a pattern. When you recognize protection once, you begin to expect it again. That expectation changes how you respond to uncertainty. Instead of fearing unknown outcomes, you anticipate divine involvement. You may also sense new opportunities emerging for your children. This is part of thriving within boundaries. Protection does not restrict growth. It creates the safest environment for it. Encourage their talents. Support their interests. Celebrate their progress. The reversal cleared space not only for safety but for advancement. It is important to remain watchful without becoming anxious. Watchfulness is awareness. Anxiety is distrust. You are called to the first, not the second. Trust that the perimeter stands. Trust that enforcement continues. Trust that access have been restricted where necessary. Preparation also includes guarding your own emotional health. A peaceful parent cultivates a peaceful environment. Take moments to rest. Refill your spiritual reserves. Surround yourself with encouragement. You cannot pour stability into your children if you are depleted. There may be moments when small challenges arise. Do not interpret them as failure of protection. Even within boundaries, growth involves learning. If correction is needed, approach it calmly. If guidance is required, provide it confidently. The presence of a boundary does not eliminate responsibility. It enhances your effectiveness within it. And finally, prepare by expecting testimony. One day, you may look back at this season and realize how much was prevented. You may see how timing aligned perfectly. You may recognize that what once felt fragile became strong. Those realizations will confirm that the activation was not temporary. It was transformative. You are not stepping into uncertainty. You are stepping into fortified ground. The next phase is not about survival. It is about stability, growth, and alignment under established protection. And as we move toward the final declaration, you will see how everything that has unfolded, from the activation to the reversal to the evidence, culminates in a sealing over your household that carries assurance, peace, and divine authority. February 18th will not be remembered in your household as an ordinary date. It stands as a spiritual marker, a line drawn, a command issued, a boundary enforced. On that day, Archangel Michael activated protective boundaries around your children, and what began as invisible intervention has now unfolded into visible reassurance. The sudden reversal was not symbolic, it was structural. A shifted direction. It stabilized atmosphere. It secured destiny. You have walked through this message step by step. You have understood the invisible battle. You have seen how protective boundaries function. You have recognized the signs of reversal. You have learned your role in sustaining this season. And now, this final moment is about sealing it with confidence. Your children are not exposed. They are not unguarded. They are not wandering without defense. There is enforcement around their identity. There is restriction around harmful influence. There is preservation over their timing. There is authority protecting their assignment. Even when you cannot see it, it stands. Let peace replace every lingering fear. The heaviness you once carried is no longer necessary. You do not have to brace for disaster. You do not have to anticipate collapse. The boundary established is not fragile. It is backed by divine authority. And what heaven establishes, opposition cannot easily dismantle. As you move forward from this message, carry assurance in your spirit. When small challenges arise, remember that boundaries do not eliminate growth, they eliminate destruction. When uncertainty whispers, recall February 18th. Recall the activation. Recall that reversal has already begun. Stability is your new baseline. Speak covering over your children daily, not as a desperate plea, but as a confident declaration. Say that their minds are guarded. Say that their steps are ordered. Say that no unauthorized influence has permission in your home. Let your voice echo what heaven has already declared. And now, we seal this message together. Type IT is sealed in the comments. Blessing code 911 is now activated. When you declare it, you align yourself with finality. You close the door on doubt. You affirm that what was activated stands. Before we conclude completely, I must speak to those who feel the stirring in their spirit. This message is not just for comfort, it is for impact. Every time you support this mission through Super Thanks, membership, or PayPal, you are sowing into a field where families are strengthened and children are spiritually guarded. The word declares, "He who sows generously will reap generously," and that is not a distant promise. It is a living covenant spoken over you. When you release your seed, you become part of the hedge built around another household. I am speaking directly to you now. Step into this moment of obedience. Do not let this revelation pass without response. The PayPal link is in the description, and the QR code may be flashing on your screen. Sow into the protection of souls, and may every seed you plant return as multiplied peace, provision, and covering over your own children. Act now in faith. Let this be your final assurance. The activation was real. The boundaries are active. The reversal is unfolding. Your children are watched, guarded, and aligned. Heaven is not distant. It is involved. Walk forward in confidence. Rest in peace. Stand in authority. And remember always, what was established on February 18th stands firm over your household, is sealed.